Hello, this is Matthew Carpenter again for Infowars.com, the Paul Revere contest. Today we're going to talk about jury nullification. You know, governments can come in and they can forcefully take away your rights, or you can just give them away through ignorance, because you don't know about them. We all still have the right to jury nullification when we're on a jury. But if you don't know to exercise that right or fully understand that, then it doesn't matter. And jury nullification is the answer to a whole host of problems. I mean, when juries don't nullify, government just sees that as a green light to create more and more legislation and run us around like cattle. I ran into a guy by the name of Dwight Callaway. He is the leading expert, I would say, here in the Boise area anyway, on jury nullification. He was a radio talk show host for 2 or 3 years or more in the Boise area in the 90s, I believe. But what you're going to see is an hour or so interview of Dwight Callaway. Pay attention, because it's important. It's probably going to be chunked up into certain sections. I apologize for that. We're new at this. But anyway, enjoy. Pay attention. Yes, Mr. Dwight Callaway. If you could first introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your own history.
Sure. My name is Dwight Callaway, and about 20 years ago, I was given a copy of this thing right here. I just happen to have one here. It may not be this exact model, this exact edition, but I was given this, which is, this one's 16 pages. I think the one that I got was a 24-pager.
Nice.
And it was from the Fully Informed Jury Association, which was going into its golden age at that time. The organization has, this is going to get a little bit sticky, but the organization, in my opinion, has pretty much dried up, and actually dried up quite a while ago. But they still have a website, and they still have things like this, lots of old newsletters on PDF, and it's a wonderful resource for information. I read this thing, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, that jury nullification is almost a panacea for everything that conservatives want to accomplish. By telling people about their right to refuse to enforce the law, we can eradicate government agencies that steal our freedom. Because government exerts power upon us in one way, and that's by enforcing laws. If they can't enforce laws, then they become irrelevant. They don't get any respect. And pretty soon, their funding will get pulled by Congress. And even if Congress never pulls their funding, the people will ignore their laws, their gun laws, their Obamacare laws, their vitamin attacks on freedom of healing laws, with impunity. And so that's what happened with me. That's when I got it. And it has, for about 3 years, I worked on this issue full time. Maybe 4 years. And I got burned out. I got upset. I got mad that people didn't get it. I got mad that people were chasing after term limits and tax limits and all other kinds of flaky, and chasing after getting such and such politician elected to office.
Like they're going to change everything and make it all good.
That's right.
Right, instead of the individual.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, to quote Dr. Phil, how's that been working for you? It hasn't.
Right.
It's like, how many times do people have to be disappointed before they realize that maybe the Sacred Cow organizations, citizen organizations, or the Sacred Cow politicians have been letting us down, sometimes badly. And so on the jury is where our power is. Thomas Jefferson said, trial by jury is the only anchor ever invented by man by which government can be held to the principles of the Constitution. The only anchor. And I think that people that call themselves constitutionalists and patriots ought to pay a lot of attention to that. And ought to like hit the books or hit the internet and read up on it. So,
how many patriots and constitutionalists actually have a copy of the Constitution in their home? I keep thinking. You know what I'm saying?
right.
You have to inform yourself. Quit just talking about it. Okay, well, if you could, just tell us what jury nullification is.
Sure. Jury nullification is a right that we have, a power that we have. It is inherent within trial by jury. It is our right and our power to vote our conscience and common sense on the jury and to refuse to enforce a law. And we refuse to enforce a law as jurors by saying not guilty, even when we're pretty sure that the defendant broke the law. Okay? We're pretty sure the defendant broke the law, or information came out in trial where the defendant is basically admitting he broke the law, but his plea remains not guilty. The defendant needs to plead not guilty and keep that as his plea the whole time, and then the jury, if they come to a unanimous verdict of not guilty, that is called a jury nullification. And jury nullifications go all the way back to the beginning of trial by jury in the English tradition. And if you want me to just roll into that, I can.
Oh, well, no, we'll save a lot of the history, I think, for somebody else to look up. One thing jury nullification isn't specifically written down anywhere. I mean, it exists simply because you have a jury, right? A jury system.
Well, it is written down. It is written down places. It's written down. This is a very, very short list.
Okay.
It's written down in the quotations from our greatest founding fathers and from the greatest jurists of American history. And what jurists means is, to my view, is great judges, usually Supreme Court judges. So this was understood, and we've got the quotes. And sometimes the quotes were said with such vehemence by the supporters of jury nullification that we know that even way back when, in the good old days, many judges were snakes and liars and were trying then to usurp the power of the jury. All right?
Sure.
So it is nothing new that the problem today is the same problem hundreds of years ago. Judges are liars. Judges are lawyers, and they're liars. And they lie about this. So we have the quotes: John Jay, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Harlan Fiske Stone, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. I need to open up my laptop and get out my list. But by the way, one thing that is important, we can maybe touch on this again because it's important. One of the things that's most important for people when they're learning about jury nullification is to get into the quotations and read them. If you'll begin to familiarize yourself with these quotations, you don't have to read the really, really long,
right,
overly academic ones. Just stick to the shorter ones.
Sure.
Until you are maybe like you're becoming a real expert, and then you can read some of the long. But just read the short ones. This will increase your confidence in jury nullification by reading who said what. By reading who said what. All right? It's very important. Quotations.
Sure. I look at things all the time. I don't memorize them, but I have a lot of note cards. I just write stuff out.
Right.
So I can look at it whenever I feel like it. Study back up on, who said what and why. We went through the history a little bit.
Well, let me give you some more of the history.
Some more history? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The nation of England, the land that is England today, got trial by jury in 1214. 1215. I'm not sure which. Sometimes you'll see one or the other. With Magna Carta, the Great Charter.
Okay.
That is when I believe it was King John was brought to heel by his nobles. And one of the things that they demanded is that there would be trial by jury in that land. There would be no more where the judge, where the king or one of the king's appointees would be judge and jury. I have also read that in Iceland, and probably to really cover the origin of trial by jury, Iceland was using juries in 1000 AD, 200 years before that. And probably in the biblical nation of Israel, and in other I'm having a vocabulary failure. This is not the right word, but in other primitive cultures, anytime a group of elders gets together and decides what to do about a guy in the tribe who has done something that is either wrong or other tribe members consider to be wrong, that is essentially a jury. It's not formalized like it is in the English tradition. So at the time of Magna Carta, it was a capital offense to poach a rabbit on the king's forest. That means go shoot a rabbit, you could be put to death. Jurors would not enforce that. That was a kind of power trip that the kings had been on for a long time. You know, they just thought they could run roughshod over the people. Okay, another couple of famous trials, and I'll move on or let you.
Okay. Well, it's just the king used to make the law and pass the judgment when you broke it, huh?
That's right. That's right. And so trial by jury took that power away from him, because the nobles were upset with the king running roughshod over them. But the thing we need to understand is that trial by jury gave rights to the common people, to the serf, to the peasant, if they had access to trial by jury. And so this was a good thing. What trial by jury is designed to do is to take the decision out of the hands of a government bureaucrat, an office holder who is beholding to the king, and put the decision in the hands of 12 common people who are just there for that one case. They're just there temporarily. And they are much less likely to be influenced by fear, by ambition, by corruption, by wanting to get some special favor for the king by doing something that's immoral. So anyway, a couple of important trials. William Penn was on trial in 1670 for his life, and his crime was holding a Quaker sermon on a London street corner. He and 3 other defendants, who were all Quakers, the jury found him not guilty, and that trial was the end of persecution of religion in England. England got freedom of religion and freedom of assembly in that one trial. Then in 1735, in the colony of New York in America, a newspaper man named John Peter Zenger was critical of the English colonial governor in New York. And there was no freedom of speech in America up until 1735. John Peter Zenger was found not guilty. And that trial gave the American colonies, 41 years before we became a nation, gave us freedom of speech and freedom of the press. One trial. Now, probably there were other trials that were not as prominent, but I've talked to guys that were newspaper reporters, and they told me, I studied the Zenger trial in J school, in journalism school. So they are taught that it's very important.
Totally.
There are lots of other examples. What people need to do is simply search for the term history of jury nullification, and you'll find about a 2-page blurb, it's not very long, that gives these and other really prominent cases. The history and the quotes are really the beginning of people getting it. When you read the history of it and you read the quotations, your confidence level will go way up. about what I'm talking about here.
I have a note here. What kind of problems can jury nullification solve? We touched on that a little bit today.
Right.
Already, but virtually everything, isn't it?
Well, let's get real contemporary. Yeah. Anytime the law is bad, anytime the government is bad, anytime the law is abusive, jury nullification is either a major part of the solution or all of the solution. In contemporary terms, jury nullifications are 100% of the solution against these gun laws. If we had what I call a jury revolution going on, we could wipe out the gun laws. Just absolutely wipe them out. Gun laws are not going to be enforced in Idaho by jurors out here. They're not going to be. They might be enforced in Massachusetts, but even there they're going to have a hard time getting convictions because there's too many people. By the way, you do not need to have 100% of the population is opposed to a law to get jury nullifications. Or you certainly do not need 100% of the population to be opposed to the law to get hung juries.
Right. You just need...
And hung juries are jury nullification light. They are useful.
You just need one person out of 12.
Well, it's better to have more.
Or, yeah.
It's better to have more.
Sure.
Okay? Theoretically, in order to have what Fiji used to call a fully informed jury, what I would call an educated jury, you need to have 1 out of 12. Of the 1 out of 12 people in the jury pool, which is the registered voters, that means 8%. Now, that's theoretically.
Right.
In practicality, we need more. And I would say the critical mass number is going to be somewhere north of 50% and probably much less than 75%. In some places, look, we have jury nullifications today. And there's no way that the people, that many people understand it. But yet juries still spontaneously nullify the law because they are so revolted by what the law is doing and what the prosecution is doing. They vote their conscience. What people need to know is they need to understand it more clearly, and they also need to know the tactics of the judges. They need to understand the tactics of the judges, and they need to understand that they can safely defy the judge, but they need to know how to do it.
I think when people go to court, they assume that the judge is going to be neutral. That's not the case, is it?
No.
Can you tell us a little bit of why?
Well, look, there are some judges that are good guys. But a judge that's a good guy is like a mafia don who's a good guy. All right?
Yeah.
If a judge has got a conscience and a heart and a soul, he cannot speak openly about jury nullification or he will be destroyed. Destroyed. Now, if he speaks openly, he can speak openly about it in conference with other judges and badmouth it. But he can't come out and write an article supporting jury nullification, or chances are he's going to be in big trouble. Now, there's an article that I have over in my box. I've reproduced it as a flyer. Judge Roy M. Carstairs in Los Angeles, like 20 years ago. He wrote an article about it. Very, very pro jury nullification article, at least unbiased. I don't know what Judge Carstairs' story was. He was probably a retired judge that was independently wealthy. So even if they pulled his retirement check, he wasn't going to get hurt too bad.
Right.
Here's the way it is. If a lawyer says the word jury nullification, begins to talk it in court, the judge will warn him once. And if he persists, the judges can, and they do, send him to jail right then for contempt of court. Judges can summarily send lawyers to jail for contempt of court if the lawyer pisses him off, just basically does anything that annoys them. Now, judges don't want to appear to be, too crazy on the bench, so they kind of keep a lid on it. But this is not unheard of at all. So, but then the other thing is if the lawyer is a known associate of mine, is known to be aiding. I've had lawyers aid me, give me aid, give me advice, give me little tips. Okay?
Sure.
And I have disclosed that in my younger and more naive days. I have bragged about this. And I immediately, whoever the bureau rat that I was talking to, prosecutor or whatever, say, who was that guy? Well, I wasn't that naive. I just gave him the back of my hand verbally and said, I'm not telling you.
Right.
I'm not telling you who he is. Because, look, lawyers, if they get on the bad side of the legal establishment, all the judges have to do is just, about jury nullification or about any other issue that is a raw, important issue politically in that town, that county, all they got to do is just tip the playing field against them a little bit. Every time they file a motion, every time they open their mouth in court in a trial, judges have got discretion. And they can get away with being biased a little bit for a long, long time. So lawyers have a policy. I've had lawyers that were very supportive of me. And I would say, well, hey, I'm going to be on talk radio next Wednesday. Would you call in? They'd go, oh, no, Dwight. You know how it is. And I'd say, yeah, okay, I do know how it is. So I appreciate their aid and their counsel, off the record and secretly. So there's something else I was going to say along that line. That's okay. It'll come up or it won't.
Yeah. I've never been on a jury.
Right.
But I stood in for a jury selection once.
Yeah.
And, I was ignorant at the time. But looking back,
yeah,
nobody ever mentioned jury nullification or anything. Now you've explained, I think, why. Because everybody gets in trouble if they do.
Well,
one question I had specifically, if you're there,
yeah,
the defendant, plaintiff, if you're on trial,
yeah,
and you're there at jury selection, which you have a right to be, right?
yes.
Right. Can you demand that the judge explain that to the jury, or?
The defendant?
Yeah.
I suppose you could.
I mean, somehow it's got to get out.
But here's the deal. If the defendant is being defended by a lawyer,
right,
his lawyer's going to disown him if he brings it up.
Okay.
All right? That's one. If the defendant is acting as his own attorney, what they call pro se, in other words, do it yourself, now he becomes vulnerable to the judge's treatment of lawyers in general.
Ah.
Okay. However, in opening statements and closing statements, lawyers do have a lot of leeway. He can talk about jury nullification without ever saying the word.
Okay.
Because what he's talking about is the jury following their conscience, doing the right thing, protecting the innocent. All right?
Right.
There was a trial here in Boise 20 years ago. It was the Randy Weaver, Kevin, what's his name, trial.
Yeah.
Jerry Spence was the defense attorney.
Right.
Okay. At that time, I was distributing literature in the parking lot of the federal courthouse and everywhere around town I could. All right?
Nice.
And a friend of mine, there was a whole peanut gallery that was going in, and they wanted to hear Jerry Spence talk every day. And a friend of mine said, Dwight, Jerry Spence talked about everything you said. Now you got to understand who Jerry Spence was. Jerry Spence has more horsepower than all the judges in Boise put together because he's famous nationwide. All right? The Karen Silkwood case, on and on and on. So Jerry Spence used to tell Judge Eddie Lodge, who was the presiding judge in that case, used to constantly be telling, Judge, I don't know if you called him Judge or Your Honor, you can declare a mistrial at this point. You can declare a mistrial. He was telling him he could declare a mistrial. And Lodge was getting pissed off, but he couldn't do anything about it because it's Jerry Spence. And Jerry Spence has got more horsepower than the judge did.
Nice.
All right? He's famous.
Fame carries power,
He's a
doesn't it?
nationwide celebrity.
Right.
All right? He's the author of many books. So, anyway, this friend of mine told me what Jerry Spence's closing statement was. But here's the deal. Later, I went and talked to one of the jurors in the trial. And it was a woman. I asked her if she remembered any of this stuff. She said no. Now, lawyers, good lawyers, are masters of so-called Ericksonian hypnosis. Okay, embedded commands. Basically, speaking directly to the subconscious mind. Okay?
The leading statements come, or is
not
it?
exactly. They just, I don't know if Spence did it or not.
All right.
But this woman had no conscious memory of Jerry Spence talking about anything having to do with voting their conscience. Their conscience was senior to the law. If their conscience said the law was wrong, they could find the defendant not guilty. She had no conscious memory of that. Yet that is, at least in part, the Randy Weaver trial was in part a jury nullification. In part, okay. And it was also not so much a jury nullification, but I think in the case of Kevin, the other defendant, I think he killed a Fed. I think they probably reasoned justifiable homicide. Okay. So, but anyway, lawyers can talk about it, but they better not overtly talk about it. They better not, like break out the whiteboard and start explaining, what Thomas Jefferson said and John Jay said, and
right.
They better not start doing the kind of stuff that I do, or that other people like me do. They have to make their points and do it in a relatively covert way. It's better to have both. It's better to have guys like me out on the sidewalk and guys like me on the internet. It's better to have the jurors already know before they get there.
Right.
And then the lawyer can help to further the process by, doing what he does, as far as whatever the particulars of the case are.
Yeah, nice. What's the difference between legislative nullification and jury nullification?
Okay, legislative or state nullification is something that is currently very trendy in America. It's not as trendy as it was a year or two ago. A guy named Tom Woods wrote a book, and he called it Nullification. The difference between, and it's actually about state nullification. It is a state legislature's power to pass laws that say we are not going to enforce the gun laws in Idaho. We're not going to enforce federal gun laws in Idaho. We're not going to enforce Obamacare in Idaho. We're not going to enforce laws against raw milk producers in Idaho, even though the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, says that we're going to. The weakness, there are several weaknesses of legislative nullification. One of the weaknesses is it depends upon our legislators, a majority of them, sometimes a supermajority of them, doing the courageous and moral thing.
Right.
Again, getting back to Dr. Phil. How's that been working for you?
Yeah.
Okay. The other disadvantage of it is that state or legislative nullification is just shoots down federal usurpations, federal dictatorship.
Right.
It does not shoot down state, county, city stupid laws, dictatorial laws. Jury nullifications only depend upon 12 or 6 common people on a jury voting their conscience. And they can take, jury nullifications can take down some city council Well, they can take down state laws that are being enforced at the county and the city level by city cops and county sheriff's deputies. So I would say that jury nullification is infinitely superior to state nullification, which got all the buzz. I talked to Tom Woods about this. His response was, everybody keeps telling me about jury nullification. And I says, well, you wrote the wrong book, Tom. And he goes, I don't want to write another book. I do not want to write another book. I do not want... It's like he got a lot of notoriety and a lot of whatever.
Right.
So anyway, that's the situation there. And people can look into it. They can look into it further, if they want to. But don't get nullification mixed up with jury nullification. And a lot of people get them garbled.
Okay. Jury education. How do we do that? You mentioned we have to do it before they get on a jury, right? Or
yes, it's best. It's not that it's definitely best.
Yeah.
Okay, here's ways you do jury education. There's lots of ways to do jury education. In my opinion, the best way to do jury education is to do it in the daylight, in front of the courthouse, real in their face, demonstrations, pickets, literature, big signs, websites, on signs, phone numbers. Be out there, be on their case, and they're there being the judges and the government's case all week long. All right. Here's another way you can do jury education. Just print some little flyers up, okay, and give them to your friends and neighbors.
There you go. Or put them on a billboard once in a while.
That's right.
Sure.
I put out back in the 90s. I put out 100,000 pieces of literature here in Idaho, mainly in Boise.
Wow.
Okay. So another thing you can do is you can send emails to individuals and writers and bloggers and citizen organizations who would be benefited by jury nullification. You can send them a little email with some little links in there, referring them to articles that actually break it out for them. For example, if it's a gun manufacturer or a gun rights group, most of them already know about jury nullification, but they're not doing enough with it. So they could be encouraged to post that article. Like I've got an article that's in the archive at Armed Females of America. All right, they need to have it up on their front page. It's a really good article. By the way, if people want to find that article, they look up the search term "eradicate gun laws." Eradicate gun laws, and it's at more places than Armed Females. Okay, so if it's raw milk producers, there's a lot of them in Idaho. If it's vitamin companies or health food stores or alternative healers, all of these people are terrified of the Food and Drug Administration. I've known personally lots of naturopaths and so forth, and if you get those people to tell you the truth, or if you just hang around them enough, you're going to get the truth, whether they admit it or not. They are terrified of the government. And it's like we live under we don't have freedom of healing in America today.
Right.
Well, jury nullifications will give us freedom of healing. Freedom of healing means a non-AMA practitioner's freedom to speak his truth without fear of the government coming after him. And it means us as individual consumers, we have the freedom to go out and buy the vitamin C or the vitamin D or the whatever at the potency that we want, without having to pay for a prescription. Right? They're coming after us on healing. They've been coming after us. Jury nullification is the solution. One of the things that's frustrates me every day, is that too often our so-called experts are talking about the problems, but they don't talk about solutions.
Right.
They talk about the problems. And a lot of my conservative friends are so proud of themselves about how much they know about the problems, but they never even think that they should talk about solutions. If you're always yapping about what the problems are, but you have no solutions, what you do is that you inadvertently convince your listener that there are no solutions, and your listener will just get depressed and quit before they ever, get in the game.
Right.
Okay?
It seems like every aspect of government tells us what we can't do. We never stop and think what we can do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
And like the rally that you and I met at the other day,
Mm-hmm.
all the speakers were standing up and talking about the problems.
Right.
They were standing up talking about what the government's going to do to us. These guys are what I call cheerleaders for the enemy. They're standing up talking about what the government's going to do to us.
Right.
We need to be talking about what we can do to them.
Right.
And what we can do to them is we can jury nullify them. And don't even get me started on the grand jury.
Yeah.
We can put them on trial. That's a little bit.
Right.
That's the next level of the jury revolution. But that is our power. So
Right.
that's what we need to be clear about, is our power, not the government's power.
Right. We outnumber them.
Yes, and we have more power than they do.
But
But as long as we're stupid, we don't have
right.
power than they do. If
Yeah.
we're too stupid to talk about our power and become expert on our power, then we don't have more power. If you do not know your power, you do not have it. If you don't know your power, and if you do not know how to articulate it, if you do not know how to carry it out, if you don't know how to pull it off, you don't have it.
There you go.
Well, that can be changed very quickly and very easily, simply with some study. And maybe an attitude adjustment, and studying the right stuff will give you an attitude adjustment. Let me give you another quote.
Okay.
Alexis de Tocqueville was a Frenchman who came to America in our earliest days. He wrote a book called Democracy in America. He went around and he looked at Americans, and he looked at our system, and he wrote this book. I have to confess I've never read the book.
Okay.
All right? A lot of people have. A lot of real conservative scholars have. But there's a quote in there where de Tocqueville explains the jury. And this is not an exact quote, but it's
Paraphrased a little bit.
yeah, I don't have it right in front of me. I was looking for it. I got it over there again on my computer in my list of quotes. He said, "It is on the jury that the American people learn that they rule.
Hmm.
And it is on the jury that the American people learn how to rule." It's on the jury. This is not his quote anymore. It's on the jury that we learn that we are the boss and they are the employee.
Right.
We're the boss, we're the master, and they're the employee. What's wrong with people today is that they think that the government bureaucrat is their master. If you get really, really confident and comfortable with jury nullification, there is going to automatically come to be an attitude shift inside your mind and inside your heart. That's going to happen. But you have got to, go beyond a little, surface looking into the matter.
You have to go beyond your comfort zone, is what I found.
You might have to go beyond your typical ADD kind of, once over lightly looking at it.
Right.
I've had lots of friends over the years that have said to me, friends and acquaintances, that have said to me, "Oh, jury nullification, I know all about that." Okay, that's the key word. I know all about that.
Right.
So I'm going to tell you something that's universal, that has never failed. All I had to do was ask them a couple of questions. And sometimes the question would just be, "Well, tell me a little bit about it." And quickly they would you could tell they were kind of getting rattled right then, because I'm challenging them. And they hadn't gotten 2 sentences out of their mouth before they're stepping in it. In other words, they're saying stuff that's incorrect. Well, the jury determines whether or not the law is constitutional. Wrong. It doesn't.
Right.
Well, when we get the FIJA law passed, we'll be able to vote to nullify the law. Wrong. And it just goes on and on and on. They have accepted incorrect information. And usually they've accepted the incorrect information because they had conversations with friends of theirs that were themselves mistaken. So it's always a good idea to do our own scholarship and go and read it, and not just listen to what our negative defeatist next door neighbor, like that guy right there, okay?
Right.
Our negative defeatist next door neighbor says about it, which is things like, well, jury nullifications can be overturned by the judge. Wrong. Never happened. But a lot of so-called conservatives repeat that. That is a falsehood. Falsehoods get out there, and lazy people don't check into them for themselves.
What would you call a bare-knuckled jury education? Bare-knuckled jury education.
Okay.
What did...
That means bare-knuckled.
Okay.
That means swing from the floor. Hit them hard. Now, here's intellectual jury education. The jury has the right and the power, and according to John Adams, the duty to refuse to enforce any law that they find repugnant to liberty, any law that they find to be an intrusion upon our freedom, things like that.
Sure.
Right? Now, here's bare-knuckle jury education. That's a big sign in front of the courthouse, or a big sign on the freeway. Judges are guilty of felony jury tampering, jury intimidation,
there you go,
jury stacking, and they are guilty of criminal conspiracy. The judge is the biggest crook in the courtroom, and he's not swearing any oath to tell the truth.
Right.
Neither are any of the lawyers. See, that needs to be pointed out. The judge makes a cut on every fine that he levies.
Really?
He makes a cut. Yeah, it's absolute flaming conflict of interest.
Totally.
Now, we used to talk about this on talk radio in the 90s here in Idaho. In the Idaho statutes, you could open it up. There was like a double page. And it said when the fine was above a certain amount, and then you go down the columns, and it was who got the cut. If the fine was over, the judge got the cut first. If the fine was over $35, the judge got $18 for every count. For every count. And that money did not go to him personally. It went into the judge's retirement fund, which would be divvied up. And how it was explained to me by some of the guys that were older than me is, you don't have to worry about it, Dwight. These other judges are watching what the other guys are doing. And if the guy's being too lenient and he's not slapping enough fines on people, they're going to let him hear about it. And say, hey, look, Bill, you know,
it goes
you got to put more. You got to put more money in the. You got to be putting more money in the kitty, because they divide it up pretty much equally, probably depending upon how many years a judge. I don't know how they divvy it up. Now, here's the deal. We used to talk about this on talk radio. They changed the law. I read the regulations now, and I can't figure it out. I got to go get a lawyer to explain to me. Before, they were just real overt about it. They just had it in columns. You know, and it was like the cops in the city, after the fine got bigger and bigger and bigger, more people got their cut. But you see, the judges are greedy. They got their cut first. They were first in line. $35. And they got over, well, they got, what's that, exactly half of it. A little over half of it.
Yeah.
$18. That's a little bit over 50%. Now, if the fine was $350, they still got $18. And then other government agencies were taking a cut as the fine got bigger and bigger. All right?
Interesting. Yeah.
The courthouse is a profit center. It has nothing to do with, now everything that I'm saying right now, all this stuff I'm saying right now, this is bare-knuckle jury education. And not only that, but we don't just do jury null education at the courthouse. Here's another way to do it. We go to their church. We go to their neighbors. And by the way, you go to the judge's neighbors, they will tell you everything about them. They will give them up. They will tell you their associations. They'll tell you where their kids go to school. They'll tell you if their wife is on the art museum board of directors. They'll tell you if they're members of the Arab Club. On and on and on. So you go to those people. It's called using shame. Judges use shame all the time in their sentencing. They shame us.
Right.
I have no problem with judges doing that. Shame is one of the most powerful things for having a beneficial effect upon people. It does not involve fining them. What it does is it involves really hitting people in their conscience. All right? And sometime in order to awaken a person's conscience, it has to be a loved one who expresses disappointment.
Right.
All right? And for judges, you would go to the people that have emotional and psychological influence over them. That would be their social contemporaries. Their family, and I don't mean the family in their house. I mean like their brother-in-law. Maybe their frat brothers.
Yeah.
Okay?
I gotcha.
Situations like that can have tremendous power over somebody. If the judge isn't too old, it might be an old school teacher that could call him up on the phone and say, Johnny, I am disappointed in you. I am reading this stuff right here and I believe it.
Right.
I did not have you be my favorite student back in the 8th grade for you to be doing this. I was not aware of this. Goodbye, Johnny. Okay?
Sure.
Those kinds of things happen. This is a power that we have. As a matter of fact, judges are more vulnerable to this than some dirtbag common criminal. As a matter of fact, common criminals usually cannot be shamed. But judges are in the field. They became lawyers and they became judges because they wanted respect.
Right.
And they wanted prestige.
They want the glory.
They wanted prestige and respect. And their wives married them because they wanted to be socially prominent. Okay?
Right.
They did not sign on to become some social pariah and become a laughingstock of their girlfriends down at the art museum or the whatever. All right?
Right.
All right, so this is the kind of stuff that's within our power. Now, this kind of stuff is really not real impressive with me sitting here on a couch talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Where it needs to be is out in front of St. John's Catholic Church or First Methodist Church, where we're talking about it there. Then it becomes something that is worthy of note on the Drudge Report or on, the big websites, your InfoWars and things like that.
Right.
And what it's going to take, I used to do this by myself. I made a decision, I'm not going to do it by myself. It needs to be a respectable number of people. It could be as little as a half dozen people. It'd be better if it was 50, but 10 people is a respectable number to go out on this mission like this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so courthouse and in their personal lives. And by the way, you never approach a judge's house. You never even look sideways at his house. We're not talking about stalking anybody. What we're talking about is a nice, clean going to the clubs and the organizations that the guy belongs to and explaining what the guy does at the office. Because judges quite often are living a double life. They're Mr. Nice Guy and Mr. Limousine Liberal.
Right.
But what they do at work is they crush people.
Yeah, they're screwing everybody.
Well, they're also guilty of other things, like maybe they may be letting people go if they like them.
Yeah.
Another thing about jury nullification is juries get ripped for letting the guilty go.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lie that is told is that the O.J. verdict was a jury nullification.
Right.
It's not true. It was not a jury nullification. It's complicated it's a whole bunch of people at fault. But anytime, here's the deal, the whole system can be corrupt. And too many people want to blame the jury when it's really the fault of the city council, the chief of police, the detective that was on the case. You can go into virtually any municipality in this country, any county, especially in your big city Democrat counties that are just crooked as they can be, just crooked and corrupt as they can be. And you will find not where guilty defendants got let go, but where they were never brought to trial.
Hmm.
The charges were never even filed because the person who did the deed was socially connected, politically connected.